What can happen to this cap frame driver, and we're still not 100% sure of the cause, but we're looking into it, is that there is a roller bearing that is inside the channel of the driver. When the driver rotates left and right, that bearing is what makes that movement smooth. When you are at hoop center, that bearing can become out of center of the rail that it rides in. Some of the symptoms of that could possibly be a X tracking or an X timeout error when you're sewing caps. I would suspect also that to an extreme, with the bearing being off center, you might also see a little degradation in your sew quality on caps. So what we would like to cover today is how you check if this bearing is centered and how to correct it if it is not. So what we are looking at on the cap frame driver is when it is off of the machine, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Phillips head screws that are across the front of the channel. The one in the center should be center line with the indexing tab that is on the red ring of the cap frame driver. So we're going to verify that our cap frame driver is at mechanical hoop center. Then we're going to flip it over, and hopefully coming down from the top, you can see that you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little tabs that you can see right there. 7. Oh, sorry. Those are actually the actual bearings that this unit is riding on when it rotates left and right. And as you can see that out of those 7, we are not centered. So we know that our cap frame driver is at mechanical hoop center. And you can see that if we're going to use this screw right here as our guide, and if we look straight down, you can see that we are not sitting in the center of the tab, for which would be number 1, 2, 3, 4. So that tells me that that bearing has shifted on this cap frame driver. So what we need to do is we need to be able to get that bearing back in center again. So to do that, we're going to start on the top side of the driver. And right here on the right and left sides, these are the tensioning screws for the cable for the cap frame driver. We're going to need to remove those in order to slide this bearing underneath to get it to its correct position. So the very first thing I want to do, though, before I ever start tearing anything apart, is I'm going to take this cable on the bottom side of the driver and I'm going to check the tension on it. I'm going to do just a pull test. I'm not putting a lot of force, but you can see that that cable flexes down just a little bit. That's just a reference for me, because on the cable tensioners, you've got an outboard screw and an outboard nut and an inboard nut. We want to make sure that this inboard nut does not change position on us. If it doesn't change position, then when we put it back together, our tensions are going to be very, very close to where they were before we took this cable off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a thin line Sharpie, and on the inboard nut, I'm going to give myself a mark, and then I'm going to put a corresponding mark on the threads that it goes over. I'm going to do that on both sides. What that's going to allow me to do is when I have this all tore apart, as long as I'm very conscious that I don't let those nuts spin a whole revolution, I can get those jam nuts back to the same position that they were previously. So using a 6 millimeter little open end wrench, I am going to remove the outboard nuts on both cables. What this is going to allow it to do is I am now going to be able to move that slider underneath to get the cable, or to get the bearings centered back up again. In some instances, you might have to hold the cable to get the nut to come loose. Luckily, I am able to hold that cable with my fingers. If you need to, just a little pair of pliers would work, anything like that. So the jam nut is off of that cable, and now the cable is relaxed on that side, and now I will come to the other side and loosen the cable on that side. Now with the cable loose, I am able to flip the driver over, and again we're going to use this guy right here as our reference, or there's also another screw down here on the bottom that is in line with him. We need those guys to be center line with tab number 4. So with the cables loose, I am able to slide this over, and the bearing is going to hit a hard stop. But now I can just slide it like this, and then I'm going to come back to my hoop center, and I'm going to check the alignment of this screw to the tab. As you can see, I'm better, but I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So I'm going to come over this way again, and I'm going to give it a couple taps against the hard stop. And I'm going to come back to my hoop center, and I need to do it some more. So I'm going to keep repeating this process until that bearing slides to where my guide points are in center line of that 4th tab. Very close. So now I am at center, and if you look down right here, you're going to see that this screw is in line with tab number 4. Or if you're using this upper one as your guide, it is in line with tab number 4. So what we have done is we have now centered this bearing that slides left and right. It is center in the driver itself. So what we've got to do now is reconnect our cables. Now your cable might unwind off of the red cylinder, which is no big deal. It's actually very, very easy to fix. So as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and unwind this cable. So this is the entire cable. So all I'm going to do is take the one that is in my left. I am going to wrap it around the red cylinder and get it to where it pops out on the right. I'm going to do the same for the cable on my right. I'm going to bring it back through. And I'm going to have it to where it pops out on the left side. So what I have done now is just wrap the cable back around the red cylinder. Now I'm placing those cables on the white guide wheels, holding the cable on the white guide wheels. I am going to come over to the top side, and I am going to slide my cable right back into the cable hold. So now if you'll remember that I gave myself those guide marks. So I will just line those two guide marks back up and thread my jam nut into position until it hard stops against the bracket. Then I'm going to do the same to the other side. Okay, I have my guide marks, so I'm going to line those up. And now I'm going to put my screw or my nut back on. Here. So now, since I took my right side all the way down to the hard stop, I have some tension on my left side. So I'm going to have to use, again, my 6mm, and I'm not able to thread it all the way on by hand because there's some tension. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use this, and I'm going to thread it on the rest of the way. Until it hard stops, until I cannot churn it anymore. Okay. You might have to use some pliers on one side to just hold the cable in place while I do my last tightening of that. I'm going to go ahead and just verify the other side is tight as well. For those of you that have done X cable tensioning, very similar to what we're doing right now. So now my cable is back installed on my driver. Remember, I did that little check before to see how far that cable flexed down from hoop center. I'm pretty darn close to exactly where I started before. I'm also going to hold the driver like this, and I'm going to rotate this ring to make sure that I don't have any mechanical binds in the driver. Driver feels very good. So another issue that can happen is that this cap frame driver in this area here does require lubrications. I don't believe that it is part of the lubrication schedule. So it's kind of, I guess I would say, as an as needed, or maybe you might want to put it into your rotation of every 3 months.
In the manual, I think we have it set to yearly.
Yearly?
Based on people who, I mean, obviously aren't running caps all the time. If caps is your jam and that's what you're doing all the time.
So like Nate was just saying, if you're doing caps all the time, every 3 months. If you're doing caps sporadically, it would be a yearly maintenance. While we were here, I wanted to talk about the maintenance though and how you do it. So you could also have some X tracking errors associated with this driver binding and not being lubricated. So what you're going to do is you're going to slide the driver all the way one direction until it stops. As you can see, when that driver is slid all the way, you have a little channel right here. That little channel is what those bearings that we just adjusted. Yeah, try to say that 5 times fast in a row. That's where they ride. So I believe in the manual we're telling you multi-purpose grease because of that's the grease that we were using at the time.
No, it's HP.
Is it? Okay. So, but HP red. You're going to take a little of that and just go right down this channel. Then you're going to come all the way to the other side till it hard stops and repeat right down that channel.
So I'm a little jealous. Chris is making this look a lot easier than we made it look in the manual. In the manual, we have you greasing the inside of where that would run.
Yeah, right? So if you see this channel right here, there's a groove right here. And that's the groove that those little roller bearings are riding in. You can get your grease right in there and it's going to lubricate perfectly. So again, anytime I do stuff with this, I'm always making sure that this stuff goes like this. Any kind of bind in these cap frame drivers can really affect your sew quality. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're not going to feel a little resistance. You're going to feel a little resistance. You might even feel a little hiccup or something like that. That's not going to affect you. What's going to affect it is if I'm doing this and all of a sudden I hit a spot that makes me take a lot of additional force to get it to slide over, that's the kind of bind that's going to cause you issues. My very last check I want to do after doing these adjustments is that when I am at hoop center, I want to make sure, because I had that cable off, that the red ring did not spin independently of stuff. If it did, that can cause my hoop center to be off. So when I'm at hoop center, this screw right here should be center line of the indexing mark on the red ring for the cap frame driver. So you have a screw here that should be center line of this right here. If it's not, it's actually quite an easy repair or fix. If we switch over to the bottom side of the red ring, this is the clamp, the bottom clamp for your hoops. If we look immediately to the right, you're going to see a kind of grayish colored clamp that has two Phillips head screws in it. One Phillips head is smaller, the other one is larger and has a washer on it. I can just come in and crack this screw loose, and what that has done is that has taken pressure off of the cable. Now, if I come back to the top side, and let's say my hoop center was off and I have this mounted on the machine, I can spin, all right, it's going to make a liar out of me. See how I can spin the red ring independent of the driver? So now if you'll notice my screws here, look where my locator clip is. It's way off. So I can come this way now, and again, you're going to do this with it mounted onto the machine. But I can spin this red ring and get it to where my clip is centered with that screw. So once I achieve that, I would take my driver back off and I would come here and I would just tighten the larger screw down again. And when I've got that screw tight, that clamp comes down and locks on the cable right here. So now this bracket's connected to the red drive ring. Because it's connected to the red drive ring and I've got it clamping the cable and the red drive ring work together again now. So now not only do I have my hoop center set exactly where I need it, I've also got these bearings on the bottom side centered as well. So that would be verifying that your cap frame driver is optimally centered for the x-axis for your machines.
One question that has come up, we ever want to clean out the old grease and residue in the bearings or bearing channel?
Yes, I would take a cloth and clean that out. I'm going to refer back to the maintenances, and I'm going to say this very sternly. You should be doing on your machines. For the X-axis, when you have to remove the black cap on the end of the beam slides all the way one direction. You go up inside and you clean the old residual grease off of the rails, and then you apply red HP. Very, very similar to what you would want to do on the cap frame driver as well. So today's was pretty short and sweet for us on the maintenance side. But again, if you take care of the driver, you're going to get better sew quality on your caps. They come in a very nice box that has foam cutouts. I highly recommend that that's how you store them. Take them off of the machine, put them in that box with the foam cutouts. They're going to stay in much better shape for the drivers.
And I would recommend, if the box gets trashed, just take that foam and stick it in a storage container that's plastic
Correct.
or rubber or whatever that you can get from the store.
I also like to keep a driver with the machine. I don't like to, if I've got 4 machines, I don't like to get the drivers all mismatched. I like to keep one particular driver with one particular machine. So if you've got a label maker or something, maybe just put the serial number and sticker on it right here, so you know that this machine or this driver goes with that machine. If you've named your machines, Seven Dwarfs always seems to be a pretty popular name for embroidery machines. Print it out, put it on here so that you know that driver stays with that particular machine.
The question about cleaning, that is in the manual if you want to look it up for pictures as well.
Yeah,
it's at the very end of the manual.
Yeah, so go to www.melco-service.com. Excellent, excellent website. We've got operators manuals for both the UI and the advanced side of the software. We've got a technical manual, and we've also got a parts manual. And we have all of this information going all the way back to red and white, XT, XTS. So it's a great resource. It's free, no login, no anything, public to everybody. So.